Consult Proctor. And if you're like me, when you find something that really works, you want to find ways to keep doing it. That's what happened to me nearly 10 years ago when I was working as a lean consultant to a manufacturer that makes circuit boards. We were in the middle of a mapping project with a cross-functional group of people and decided to share a spaghetti flow diagram that visually showed the process steps of their typical circuit board going through their plant. It looked like a real mess. We were looking at it, and we were kind of explaining to them how spaghetti flow diagrams work. And essentially, one of the things that popped out to everyone was there was this one machine in the plant that everything had to go to. Now, this plant, they were moving circuit boards around on carts, so it was very manual, and they had a lot of different areas that were clean rooms, so they'd have to actually take things out of one clean room, move it over to another area, bring it into that room, and it just added a lot of time going to that one machine. And a comment came out in that meeting that you know, the reason we have to go to that machine is there's only one of them in the plant, and it's a very expensive machine, so we only have one of them. And there happened to be a maintenance guy in the plant in the meeting there, and he said, you know what, we have an old piece of equipment that we could retrofit to do that, and it would be very inexpensive. And if we did that, we could just move it right into that one area where we have things moving out of to get to that other machine. And to make a long story short, over a period of about 10 minutes, we put together a plan to go ahead and retrofit that machine. And as a result, they were able to significantly reduce their lead time. I think the reason I'm telling the story is that was really one of the first times for me that there was a big aha that happened. We had the right people in the room. They were all on the same page as far as understanding what was going on. And we were actually able to solve the problem, a big problem that they had had for quite a while, in a matter of minutes. And I like to talk about that as being part of the green room zone. When everything's coming together and everyone's working collaboratively, you have the right people there to see the problem, to solve the problem, to make decisions, and to move forward. My hope for you today is to expand the idea of collaborative problem solving and the potential to create this green room zone or green room environment to allow your groups to solve difficult problems or design world-class systems. If you like the information that we presented today, I'd like you to think about this as the beginning of a discussion where our company would like to talk with your company about how we can support this within your operations. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more later on in this webinar. Now, we're certainly limited in time today, so I'm just going to touch on a few things and focus on an overview of the concept and the benefits, but please feel free to submit questions to me throughout the webinar if you have them. You can also raise your hand, and I can see this is one of the first webinars we've done, so if I see your hand, I'll try to go ahead and unmute you or have you ask your question. But please feel free to submit those questions and type them out to me throughout the webinar. We'll answer them. We will have 5 to 10 minutes at the end to answer questions and also field any additional questions people might have. I'm going to try to make this event collaborative by also doing some quick polls. I'll be asking for your response for some questions and would appreciate any feedback. And finally, we do have a quick survey at the end of the webinar where we just ask you to rate the value and provide feedback for us that we can use to improve the webinar in the future. So with that, let's get going. Today we're going to talk about from expert to collaborative teams, the green room approach, benefits of the green room approach, pitfalls to consider, a collaborative partnership, and then do some Q&A. And I'd like to just give you a little bit of a background and how we kind of got here. You know, and I'm just going to flash this up here. Up here, when I came out of school as an industrial engineer back in the late 80s, I was essentially taught to be an expert in problem solving. And you go out and you hire an expert, either an internal consultant or an external consultant, and they come in, and essentially this is the expert versus people using the system. So you're coming in and you're getting some information on how the system works, you're putting together a recommendation, and you're feeding that back to the group, people that are going to be using the system. and they're giving you feedback, and there's going to be some back and forth. And at the end of the day, you're going to have we always said 3 recommendations at the end. Problem with this is there's a lot of back and forth time. It tended to take very long time to do this. It tended to be very expensive. So one of the things that we started doing, let me say in the 90s, was saying, well, let's involve people in the process. So we actually create a project team of people, which would be made up of people within the process, the areas we were working. It could be someone from the shop floor, it could be someone in the purchasing department, and we would get them involved throughout the process in the design. But we were still pretty much the expert. We were getting their feedback, and our catchphrase during this period was, you'll never be surprised at the end, because we would have involved you along the way getting your feedback. And it worked a lot better than the expert mode because you had people involved and you got a lot better information, and you got a lot better feedback throughout the whole process. Well, at some point in the late 90s and early 2000s, we started to look at, geez, if we could just have the people that worked in the process do the design, we think that we could really make big strides in reducing the time to do this work, as well as coming up with better solutions. And that's really, the big aha moment for us is how do we create this green room where people that are actually working in the areas that we're looking at, whether it's an office area or an area on the floor, plant floor, or a warehouse, how do we help them to design world-class systems? And we become more like a tool or resource for them to do that very quickly. There's some underlying principles to the philosophy, the tool that we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to flash them up here, but it's a combination of world-class organizational development philosophies like action research, how you show visual display, the use of visual display to help people understand information, GE workout, skilled facilitator, but it's also some scientific or engineering principles, system modeling, lean manufacturing, theory of constraints. There's certainly a number of problem-solving philosophies that we can integrate into the Six Sigma, organizational processes in consulting and coaching, the breakthrough strategy, systems thinking, the Eureka process, which is a very interesting process. It's on basically how do you create very out-of-the-box creativity. And it was developed by a guy named Doug Hall from Procter & Gamble. And flawless consulting, which is basically how do we work with companies to make sure that they're getting the benefit, the value. How do we help fill in where they may have some areas of weakness. Let me just throw this out here. So the green room approach is basically a process for creating a controlled environment for problem solving. And I don't know if I love this diagram, but I think it does a pretty good job just kind of showing the elements. Essentially, we've got some general elements before and after an event. At the very beginning, of course, we have determined project objectives. We're going to talk about each one of these a little bit more. Then we got some data collection for both technical and non-technical information. We have the development of a collaborative tool. And then we have, finally, the actual event. And you can see a lot of things happen before the actual event, which is where we've got this green room and everybody's in this room. And then there's some things that happen afterwards. We might have some multiple events, so there's things that happen between events, and we also have ongoing support for making sure the objectives are met. There's going to be action items. So what I'm going to do right now is just kind of go through each one of these. And before I move on, I want to just talk about an example of a green room event. And this happened back in, I think it was late 2001, maybe early 2002. I was working with an organization, Case New Holland, and they had just done a paint system which wasn't working well. So they had brought us in to look at, well, how can we fix this system? They're going to spend another $3 to $6 million to improve it. And so what we did is we created a dynamic simulation model. It was very visual. we could watch the different, they were making combines, and we could watch the components of these combines go through the system. And everyone was there. The plant manager was there, the maintenance guys, the industrial engineers. And we were watching the model, and then all of a sudden, the model just started to jam up. There was a big traffic jam in a certain part of the system, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be awful. I mean, I don't know why it's doing this. And I said to the group, I really apologize. I don't understand why this is jamming up. Well, the maintenance guy who was in the room said, actually this does happen every day. And the plant manager's like, what are you talking about? And he goes, oh yeah, every day. We end up having to actually go up into the rafters and unjam this. And so the model is actually accurate in that there is a jam periodically. So we were like, wow, this is great. So we had the guys in the room that were actually going to be redesigning the programming for the conveyor system. And we went through probably a 10 or 15-minute period where we said, well, how do we redesign the programming so this doesn't happen? And to make a long story short, we were able to redesign the logic, rerun the model very quickly, and see that sure enough it did fix the problem. And so that's an example of a green room event. I mean, this is something that's been plaguing them for a long time. We needed to get the right people in the room talking. We had a collaborative tool, in this case a simulation model, that was allowing us to all see what was going on in a very visual way that people could understand. So let's talk about some of the different parts. First one is goals and expectations, which I would argue is something you need to do at the beginning of any project. And those goals need to be meaningful. They need to be tied to organizational goals. In other words, if the organizational goal is to increase capacity by 20% so you can sell more, then your goals at operational levels should tie back to that. They need to be clear and specific, and in general they need to be SMART goals. SMART is an acronym which basically lays out types of things that you want to have in goals. We actually did a newsletter on SMART goals. If you go into our website, you can get that information, or if you can't find it, you can certainly email us and we'll give you a link to that article. But they need to be specific and measurable. They need to be time sensitive, so people have a specific start and end. That's the first part of Green Room. The second part is probably the most important, I think, and that happens to be preparation. And the preparation, basically, there's a lot of data collection that goes on, and some of it is interviews and discussions, which I consider to be non-technical, and some of it is observations at the source, where we're actually going out and watching how a system runs. Now, obviously, if it's a new system we're designing, then we're not going to be able to observe the system, but we can go out to an existing operation that is there, and we can see what types of problems they experience that we might get in this new system. So we collect that data, and we summarize the information, and again, some of it's technical, and some might be non-technical. And we try to make that information unbiased and non-judgmental. In other words, we're not, it has nothing to do with individuals. If you're a big Deming person, really if there's a problem, it's typically not the people in the system that are a problem, it's the system itself and the way that it works. And finally, it needs to be accessible. It needs to be something that everybody can understand, visual, intuitive. Everyone gets glassy-eyed when they see a big spreadsheet with lots of numbers. We try to make that information very visual. I'll give you an example of that here in a second. And then we actually have the event itself. And so the last thing we want to do is create a real-time collaborative tool. This is something that allows us to solve a problem or design a system in the room. We're not getting together to talk about it. We're getting together to actually do it. And these tools can be models, and there's physical models, there's spreadsheet models, there's simulation models, there's CAD models. We've got a CAD drawing, an AutoCAD drawing, for example. It could be a simulation, like I mentioned before. It could be a visual display. It could just be a big, giant chart that's on the wall that everyone can relate to. It could be a graph or a photo showing what's going on in the plant. Photos are great for take a photo of an area that's cluttered and show it to people, and they start looking at it. They can recognize because when they're in it, they don't really see it. Physical displays is the last type of collaborative tool. You could do a prop where you could bring in your products or rejects and have those to show people and pass around. And this is just an example here of the difference. So this is an example of a doctor's office, an orthopedic surgeon. We collected the data and it went into, it's called an AEIOU chart with closest ratings and everything. And if we showed this chart here to people, then, you know, what are they going to really get out of it? It's going to be difficult for them to understand and get anything intuitive out of it. But if we take that chart and we turn it into a space relationship diagram like this, and we say, well, the thicker lines are departments that need to be closer together, then they can easily see some things. Maybe they say, oh, the break area here can be far away. Here's some things that X-ray room, maybe that needs to be close to the cast room. It's a lot more intuitive to do it this way than to show the information this way. And the more that you can do visual, the better. It allows everyone to get on the same page. Now finally we have the event itself after all that planning, and we want to create a collaborative space, and here's some features of that. You want to be able to create a common understanding of the problem, and again, if it's visual and everyone can see it, then that's great. You want to create a fun and non-threatening environment. I always believe that fun is the key. There have been books about this. Fun is one key of disabling people's defenses. You know, and that's why a lot of times you do off-sites, you make it dress casual or casual, and you have events. You want to make it fun and non-threatening because that allows people to kind of step out of their roles within an organization and really start to work together. Kind of a lubricant. Sometimes beer, people talking, you know, go out for a drink. So some of the best problems are solved in a bar after work. You'd like it to be focused and have a lack of distraction. And of course today everyone's got a laptop and a BlackBerry or an iPhone, and you want to, if you have to get people away from that in order to focus, you want to make sure you create that environment. And again, real-time collaborative tools, which is what allows you to take the information, see it, and then do something about it. Whether it's designing a new layout. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've laid out a plan in a 2-hour period because we had the tools there. We were able to quickly move things around and try things and see how things would work or do a simulation model. I think that's a big part of creating this collaborative space. A typical agenda for one of these green rooms would be, first of all, we'd give feedback on all this information we collected. So we would say, okay, we went and we spent some time out in your facility, or we talked with certain people, and we'd feed the information back to the system, to the people that are in the room. And then many times they agree on some fundamental things. They might have disagreements on how to get there, but they all have the same agreement on what's going on. Then we talk about world-class philosophies and processes for solving the type of problems being considered, or if it's a design we're trying to accomplish, a new design. We talk about lean processes and what you want to see in a new design. And then we start working on the actual solutions. It's a working meeting. So we take that information and we start to, and using our collaborative tools, we start to either solve the problem or design the system. After the event, so this is unfortunately many times there's a big vacuum, and we do all these high fives at the end of the event, and everyone feels we've accomplished a lot. But in many cases there are post activities. We have to make sure that things get accomplished, action items get done. So there's transition activities, which are things that happen between events or after. It could be coaching and facilitation. It could be organizational development activities. You know, maybe we need to hire a person to oversee certain things, or maybe there's a change in organizational structure, and there's some ongoing support. It could be project management. It could be engineering support on the technical side. We have an action plan for what we're going to do, but we need a technical person that can maybe put together specifications. So that's really the whole green room approach. So again, it's setting a goal. It's doing some preparation. It's the actual event, and there's post-event. And I like to throw this one up. It's basically construction of a green room, and recognizing that like a symphony, to create the green room zone, there are a lot of things that have to come together. For us, it's, systems engineering, analysis tools, and team training maybe, and implementation expertise. So there are a lot of things that have to come together to create this green room zone. Now, some of the benefits of green room: high-speed completion of projects. We find that typically we can complete traditional engineering projects in less than 50% of the typical time. And again, that's because we're kind of, instead of doing all this back and forth, we're doing everything in the room. Get things done very quickly. Secondly, the project team owns the solution. Rather than having us come up with a recommendation which has to be evaluated by the people we're working with or the people that are working in that system, they're actually coming up with a solution. It means it's a lot more likely that they're going to be supporting it, as there's always some hiccups that happen, and if they own the solution, they're more likely to try to work through those hiccups. We also like to think that when we work with companies, that there's an upgrading of project team capabilities, whether we're working with them or whether you're bringing in new people to your own internal efforts. You're upgrading capabilities because you're introducing them to this process and the tools. We believe that the solutions that come out of these types of collaborative events are really breakthrough or are significantly better solutions than what you would get if you had an outside person come in and tell you what they think you should do. They tend to be more doable, and they tend to be more sustainable. Before I talk about pitfalls to consider, I'm going to just share one other example here of another collaborative event. It was with a beer company. This beer company had been thinking about buying a new freezer for a number of years, and they wanted to get kind of a cost-benefit analysis of what it was going to take to buy that, and what were some of their pros and cons. And so what we did is we created a spreadsheet financial model for them where they could easily plug in the different options to consider, and it would give them a return on investment and payback period. It was just a one sheet model. We sat down with their controller, their president, vice president, and the person from their manufacturing area, and we were actually sitting in their cafe. In less than 2 hours, we were able to generate a whole bunch of different options for them to look at, options that we could quantify the benefits and the cost to do. And they ended up taking that spreadsheet model that we created and actually creating some more options. But through that, we were able to help them solidify their decision. And again, there's another example. You got the right people in the room. You've got a collaborative tool. It doesn't have to be a big fancy, dynamic model. It can be a spreadsheet that everyone can look at and can use as a way of coming up with a decision or solving a problem or designing a system. There's always pitfalls, aren't there? Here's some of the things that we've run into that we would like to surface to the top. You're probably all familiar with them. I like to do a drum roll sometimes. It's a drum roll. And one of them is not having a specific goal or objective. One of the worst things that can happen is to do a project and be real happy with the results, but having it not meet the goal or objective of the project. So we encourage companies to work on developing a charter document which lays out all this at the beginning. Skipping the preparation part. People love to skip the preparation and go right to the meat. And I think preparation is a very important part of this process. It kind of helps you develop relationships and get an understanding before you get in the room. And we think that it's a key thing to do. It's funny, I did a class in problem solving a couple of years ago, and there's like 5 steps, and one of them is identifying the root cause of the problem. And when we actually did some class exercises. Even though we had just learned that we needed to do that, people still skipped a step. They just said, "Oh, we know what the problem is," and they skipped right over it and went to the next thing. So it's a human nature to skip the early stuff and want to go right on, and I would hesitate. I tell people not to do that. Starting with an agenda for a certain outcome, but I mean here is if you think you know the answer before you even get started, then that's probably something to try to avoid. Try to keep an open mind. You can limit yourself to potential solutions that might be better, or potential designs that might be better if you cut yourself off in the beginning. Not practicing. Developing collaboration is not a one-time deal. You need to practice it. You start small, like anything else. Practice on something simple and build up your capacity to work on collaborative things. Not supporting a collaborative environment really. A lot of people say, oh yeah, we're real collaborative here, but then they shoot the messenger when they deliver bad news, or they don't listen when people have ideas. Many times I go into companies and employees are dying to tell me their ideas for making improvements, and they're like, no one listens to me. And so I end up just being a conduit to help surface some of their ideas, and sometimes they have really great ideas. So just being really careful that you say you're collaborative, then that means you support collaborative types of environments. And then not following up after an event. And many times we do the event and then there really isn't good follow-up. You want to make sure that you continue to follow up, you won't get all the benefits. Things just kind of die away. I'll give you an example. I did a project for Gojo, and I did some training on setup reduction, and after that they basically hired me for half a day a week to meet with 3 groups, and the sole purpose of that was just to make sure that that group knew I was coming in to see how things were going. I wasn't actually doing any of the action items. I was just coming in to help them if they had some hiccups, or just to make sure they were following through on what they said they would do. And that's an important thing. You got to make sure that you go the distance. If you're going to come up with an action plan, you want to make sure that you do it all. That was a mistake, by the way. Now, Epicenter, we're really big into doing collaborative efforts within our company. We help our clients create collaborative environments through things like our green room, and we also try to create a collaborative work environment between us and our clients. And there's some things that we do here. We do use and we teach the green room approach. And I know Cindy Scott, our salesperson, is on the line, and she would be the first to say that we would love to come and talk with you about the green room approach and how we can use it for your maybe a project that you have coming up or a difficult problem you haven't been able to solve. We focus on partnerships. Our company is not about going after projects, but more creating partnerships with companies that we feel are willing to really invest in themselves, and they want to grow and they want to create relationships with outside firms that will help them in the long run and grow with them. We also share practical common tools. We have a monthly newsletter, Epicentral, that I've been doing for 2 or 3 years, and each I try to get them out once a month, but they basically share common tools. Some of the things that we talked about today are in there. We also have created this past year a new system called the Bank of Hours, and we have a number of companies that will have us come in for something, and then they'll call us a month later and we'll do something, and it's really hard to kind of create momentum that way. So one of the things that we've been working on is developing this Bank of Hours program, where if you invest and say, well, we will do so much in work with you over a year, we can create a flexible system where we give you a discount on your rate to work with us, so you can get high-value stuff for less money because you've committed to so many hours. And we just say, okay, you have a year to use up this time, this amount of time that we're giving you. It's a great way for us to lower our costs for companies. If they have multiple facilities even, we're willing to spread it over several facilities. So it's just a way for us to make it more flexible for companies to work for us and offer them a discounted rate. And that's pretty much it for this webinar. If you have questions or comments, you can certainly email us at you can go to our website, www.epicentergroup.com, or you can email us at cscott@epicentergroup.com or wproctor@epicentergroup.com. Thank you.